You're listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, and one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and actual brother, Dave White. Hey, Dave, how you doing over there?
Alive. I'm actually doing pretty okay. I was looking at the new Vinegar Syndrome releases, the stuff that just got announced.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm not super enthusiastic about it, but I noticed that one of the things is that movie Dangerous Game, the Madonna movie from the 90s. This is when like erotic thrillers were real hot in the 90s.
It's like an erotic thriller, yeah.
Yeah, and then I started thinking to myself, what was with Hollywood trying to convince us that like men like Harvey Keitel and Willem Dafoe were like sexy leading men?
Oh, I know. There was a period, because it sort of seems like the king of those movies, and I believe it really kind of began with Angel Heart, but all of a sudden, Mickey Rourke is in like all of them.
Yeah, I guess. But Mickey Rourke's like,
but not just him.
He's like a little bit attractive, but like Harvey Keitel, Jesus Christ.
You know what? They saw his wang hanging out in Bad Lieutenant. And they were like, you know what? This guy has no problem being sexy.
He'll show it all off.
Yeah. Oh, man. So, we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. There's no one else I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. And Dave's over there at that Werewolf. Mm-hmm. And we're having a really good time. So you should follow us if you're on the Instagram. We've also got a sweet website at bringmetheaxe.com. You can listen to all our past shows there and read the transcripts. And if you don't know, we have another show called 99 Cent Rental, where we cover all manner of video store madness on the weeks that Bring Me the Axe is off. Our latest episode, covering Alan Arkush's 1983 rock comedy Get Crazy, is out now. And we'll be back next week with a listener request as we look at Billy Wilder's 1950 send-up of Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard. You can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. And lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And we're on YouTube. And you can search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Yeah, just any of them. Just all of them. Just get on
all of them. Just like look around. If there's a little review button, just say, hey, these guys, I think they got 5 stars in them. Here you go. Like, it's real simple. Like, you can do it right now.
You're on your way to work and you're like on the train. You tap the person next to you. Just be like, hey, ma'am. It doesn't matter if it's what the gender presentation is. Just say, hey, ma'am, I think you should listen to this podcast. And if it were me, I would go, what? Get away from me.
If it were me, because I'm the kind of person who talks to people on the train.
Yeah, you are.
I'd be like, hey, thank you so much. You're right in assuming that I would listen to this.
Yeah. So, I would point you to our trip to see Demons last October, where you got stuck repeatedly talking to an incredibly drunk man. Something about the guy next to him's girlfriend. I would have left the theater, honestly, if it were me, if I left to my own devices.
You'll recall, however, that I did reach a point where I literally said, shut the fuck up. Stop talking to me.
That guy sucked.
That guy fucking sucked. I would have thrown him off the balcony if I could have. But that would have just hurt somebody below, and then I would have felt bad. Because we're all just there to see Goblin. Or Claudio Simonetti.
Listen, Somerville Theater, get better seating and keep drunk people away.
I would go there. Oh, God, you could smell it on the guy. Who the fuck would let him in? They wouldn't let him into a bar in Boston, but the Somerville Theater will let him in. They probably think this guy's drunk enough to not mind these seats. Yeah. So, hey, if you listen on YouTube.
Yeah, well, he was the only one, I think.
God, we were just shifting the whole time. What a fucking nightmare. But that show was pretty good.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So if you listen to YouTube, do us a favor. Give the episode a like. Leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. You're a lot of fun. And I do enjoy talking to y'all on the Instagram. So keep it coming. I just want to get all that out of the way right at the top of the show because I'm about to give you a taste of what we're talking about tonight. Here's a taste.
Who will dare to face the challenge of the Funhouse? Who is mad enough to enter that world of darkness?
Something is alive in the Funhouse. Something not alive like its father. Something better dead. Something that has the form of a human, but not the face.
This better be good.
It's gonna be great.
Something that feeds off the flesh and blood of young innocents.
Come on, here we go. This is it.
Something that tonight will turn the Funhouse into a carnival of terror.
I don't know what that thing is. We're gonna try to kill it. I just want to get the hell out of here.
The Funhouse, coming soon from Universal Pictures. The Funhouse. It's a carnival of terror from Tobe Hooper, the director who terrified you with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So that trailer, it mentions the Texas Chainsaw Massacre by name, and I was not aware that movie was sort of like as big as it was in the day. I was sort of assumed that it was a movie that kind of came around to its reputation. Like it was one of those movies that it didn't play everywhere. Not everybody had seen it, but like people knew it by reputation, you know?
I think it gained a lot of notoriety pretty quickly,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. But that is a trailer that goes out of its way to not show you too much, and I appreciate that. Most of the ones that we do on here, they just give you all the goods right out
Well,
the
I
gate.
think they assume that you've seen it because it's been 40 years.
Yeah, that's the original theatrical trailer, however. And so like they were presenting this to people who had not yet seen it. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll talk about it because we're going to do it as we usually do. Warning before we get rolling. We're going to talk about this movie from beginning to end. So spoilers are to follow.
I'm going to tell you something about this movie. I'll tell you now. This is the opposite of our Night of the Creeps, where I came away loving this movie a little bit more.
Yeah, me too. Because, like, I did my usual thing where I watch it a couple of times, I take notes, I really examine it, and then sort of like I had a night where I wasn't watching the Funhouse, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to indulge in a movie of his that I've never seen, and I watched Eaten Alive, and was super fucking surprised. And it's one of those movies where I was like, why the fuck did I wait as long as I did to see this movie? Because I wish that I had the years to go back and watch it again and again. Like I already ordered the Arrow version of it, so I could just like really get down with that one. I am now like, I was a fan in the sense that like I like a couple of his movies a great deal, but of the sort of big four American like horror directors of the era, I think he's the one that I sort of pay attention to the least. And I'm definitely regretting that at this point.
Well, I had a very similar thought, and I think where I came out was he is probably, of the big four, he is probably the most varied and the most consistent.
Yeah. Like he definitely he finds his speed very early on. This sort of killer redneck thing is sort of his bag, and he doesn't really shake that off until, formally until he gets to Poltergeist. But up to this point, he's done 3 of them, and he does it very, very well. He's going to go back to that well eventually, but like he's got a vibe that I think I'm finally fully understanding at this point. Like I really get it, and I think I appreciate it more than some of the others. Like that consistency is something that I really, really like, because man, this guy, he's a fucking weirdo, first of all.
Yeah,
and there are themes that he presents in a couple of his movies that I really appreciate, that we'll talk about here. And then a little later on this year, we're going to do the Texas Chainsaw Massacre proper. And I've got thoughts on that one. And you sort of, that I feel like he didn't fully get it out of his system until this movie. So we'll sort of get there as we get into it. But yeah, man.
I think he's also one of those directors where you look at what they make and you think, oh, you could make anything and it would be good. Like it's not that, well, he has made some not super good movies, but like people like Steven Spielberg or I think even John Carpenter, where you're like, oh, you're an auteur, you're an actual visionary creative. you're not like a journeyman guy, no matter how you started out. Like you have an aesthetic and an eye and a style that comes through no matter what you make. Like, I mean, he made the fucking Salem's Lot TV movie, which basically doesn't feel like a TV movie at all. But like, he made that, and that movie is cool as hell.
Yeah.
And it's a fucking TV movie from what, 78, 79?
Yeah, 78 or 79. But yeah, man, I'm telling you, tour de force. This guy, I am fully on board with Tobe Hooper verse. We're gonna make 2024 the year of Tobe Hooper.
Yeah, okay.
I do believe we're doing like 3 of his movies this year.
We are.
Yeah, at least. But yeah, so let's do some facts here, shall we? The year was 1981.
Ah, yes.
It's a good year, a year that we feature frequently. So here's some other movies that were released in 1981. Just Before Dawn, which is one that I caught last year for the very first time. And man,
not a great movie, but quite possibly the best ending to any film ever.
That's where I was going. It's got an ending that blew my fucking mind. I've never seen anything like it. If you've never seen Just Before Dawn, you owe it to yourself. If anything, it's got a crazy fucking ending. Also that year, Cannibal Ferox came out.
Oh, yeah. I watched that a couple of months ago. That movie is not good.
I am not. You know what? I don't care for the cannibal.
No, I don't either. I try because I love Italian exploitation, but
there's something really, really fucking nasty about them that I don't like. Also, they have like the sort of prerequisite for a cannibal movie coming out of Italy that really bothers me and bums me out is the fucking animal killing.
Oh yeah. Rene Cardona did the same thing though in a lot of his movies. He would just kill animals, and I don't know if it's just like an attitude towards animals, maybe, or an attitude that is less restrictions maybe in other countries, but it does not give it any more authenticity, and it's fucking cruel and gross and completely unnecessary.
Yeah. It's such an affliction on those movies that like even Grindhouse releasing when they put Cannibal Holocaust out, we're like, here's a version of the movie that doesn't have that stuff in it. So that's the one that I watch.
Yep.
Anyways, also that year, Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker.
Oh man.
Which is our second episode of this podcast, and a movie that I recall fondly.
I'm Your Girlfriend Now, Billy, is going to haunt me forever.
Yep. Good God. Go back and listen to. Actually, don't go back. That's when we were still trying to figure this fucking podcast out back then. It's a rough episode, but it's a great movie.
Watch the movie though.
Definitely watch the movie. There is a Severin release coming up in 4K, and I'm not sure that movie needs a 4K release, but fuck it, I'm gonna buy it.
See.
Yeah. So
I bought it. So
yeah. Also that year, a movie called Madhouse came out. This is an Italian one. I don't believe I've seen.
It's an Italian movie that is shot in the United States, made with mostly an American cast. It is not good. It makes very, very little sense. Like even by Italian horror slasher standards, it's pretty fucking weird and convoluted and confusing.
Yeah. It looks it almost looks similar in plot to Blood Rage. So I'm gonna have to go back and check
a little bit. It has a twin thing going on, but they're pretty upfront about the whole thing right away.
Gotcha. All right, and then rounding out 1981 is a really, really weird Indonesian one called Mystics in Bali, which has, like Just Before Dawn, has a special effect in it that will blow your fucking mind, where a woman's head separates from her body and goes and flies around with like all her guts and shit hanging off of it. It's a crazy, crazy movie. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah. Apparently it's some kind of like an Indonesian monster legend, like a folk thing. And it's something like witches can do. Like their heads will fly around at night, like eating unborn babies and shit, but like their guts hang out of it. It's crazy. Let's do the cast and crew. As we said, the director is Tobe Hooper. He's one of the all-time greats of horror movies. He's behind numerous unimpeachable classics of the genre, helming no less than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a movie that I've come to appreciate greatly in recent years, and Poltergeist, one of the best horror movies of the 1980s.
You know, I never liked either of those two until I watched them recently. And it's a little bit like a Lost Boys situation where I was like, I never liked the Lost Boys. And then all of a sudden I'm like, God damn, those movies are fucking good.
Yeah, I came around to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre very late, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it has nothing to do with the movie, but it has everything to do with that sort of thing that we were talking about, where it's a movie that everybody knew by reputation, but nobody had actually seen. So when they'd be like, "Oh, that movie's a bloodbath. It's so gory," and then for years I've been waiting for this like charnel house of just like splashy splatter blood and gore, and there's really not much.
No.
So by the time I got to it, I was 13 or 14. And I was like, "What the fuck is this? This movie's boring as hell." And so it took a long time for me to get back around to it.
It is a very loud movie though. Like it is a very aggressive film in a lot of ways that I think stand in for the violence.
Yeah. Also, dry, hot, and dusty goes a really long way. Where blood and gore definitely doesn't. Like,
yeah, I mean, Rob Zombie has built a whole career on that.
Oh yeah. So like, but I came around to it much later. I loved Poltergeist from like the beginning though. Like that was a formative experience for me, was watching that one on TV.
Actually, I wouldn't say that I didn't like them. I think I've gained a deeper appreciation for them.
That's really apropos. That's kind of what I mean. Like my first initial reaction to Texas Chainsaw was like profound disappointment. And then eventually it grew on me. And in the last like 5 or 10 years, I've seen it numerous times. And it's one of the movies that it's like, now I get it. And I don't know why it took me so long to get there, but I really do appreciate it much more than I did when I was a kid. I believe that this movie here, The Funhouse, is his first studio picture following the success of Salem's Lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, prior to this, everything was it was an indie.
Because what is Eaten Alive is right before Salem's Lot, right?
It's a few years. So Eaten Alive is 76, I think. Salem's Lot is 79. So yeah, everything is kind of like there's a gap of a few years between everything. So our cast, we've got Elizabeth Berridge, who plays Amy. Our lead.
Is it Berridge?
Berridge or Burridge? I'm not really sure how you say that. Her biggest credit lands a few years after this with Amadeus. She, like a lot of the folks who end up in the movies at the time, the sort of stuff that we do on this pod, she ends up doing a lot of TV. She did some soaps, some primetime stuff, continues to work to this day.
Which is wild because she's really fucking good.
She is very good. Apparently, she's like at this time, because all of these actors are New York actors, and so they're all stage. She apparently was like the youngest member ever of the Actors Studio. So she's like a real actress, you know. And in all of the supplemental materials and the interviews that I'd seen about this, everybody talks about her as like she was very method. I'm like, I don't know how you do method on a movie like this, but God bless her. Rounding that out, we've got a guy named Cooper Huckabee, who was 30 at the time of this movie's production. He's supposed to be a teenager here. Definitely does not look or read like a teenager.
Which one is he? He's her boyfriend, right?
He's Buzz, yeah. So he is one of the busiest actors that you've definitely seen in numerous roles, but probably didn't know his name.
He looks really familiar.
He does. He's got like a that guy look. He's also real hunky and like very leading man kind of stuff. But he's definitely not a teenager.
No, I'm not. I mean, none of them. They don't. I guess Elizabeth Berridge looks kind of teenage-ish, but the other ones don't.
No, they definitely don't. But they're supposed to be like high schoolers. Because there's a moment where they have this conversation in a car where he's like, "You still in school?" He's like, "Yep." "You gonna go to college?" He's like, "Yeah, hopefully." I'm like, oh boy, I did not see that coming. You guys could have made this like more reasonable if they were like university students or just like local kids.
There are moments throughout this movie, and I will point them out when we see them because I feel like it's kind of glaring, where you can see studio interference.
Yes,
and
for sure.
Some of them I actually had confirmed for me while I was watching some of the supplemental stuff on the disc.
Yeah. And so rounding out our cast is a guy named Kevin Conway, who plays the Funhouse Barker, and he plays all three of them, actually.
And he is incredible in this movie.
He's the best thing.
Mhm.
Like, oh my God, yeah. So he does a lot of stage and TV, anything produced around New York City. He took the job for a really noble purpose, and this is something that he actually says on the Funhouse disc. He'd never done a horror movie before and thought that it looked like fun. And I can really get behind a statement like that.
And by all accounts, it was.
That's the thing. This is one of those movies that when everybody talks about it, they seem to remember it fondly.
Yeah.
And I really like that because it does shine through in a movie when it's not a tortured production where everybody fucking hates one another and the director sucks and shit. Like this movie, I would not call this movie fun necessarily, but there is a vibe through it where everybody seems to be enjoying themselves. And so, yeah, and lastly, just mentioning it because we never really mentioned the monsters or the killers, the people who play them in this. There's the monster in this movie apparently has a name. He's never named in the movie. I don't think they ever say a name.
Is his name like Gerard or something like that?
He's played Gunther.
Gunther
is the name that they give him. I don't know. It might have come from the book,
Well,
where like the author, who I'll mention that.
The book is based on the movie. It's not.
Yeah, but like you.
Oh, I see what you're. Yeah.
Right, and that's what I mean is I think that, like how they always one of the things I've never ever read any of these novelizations. I only sort of find out about them in the sort of like secondhand like way that we go about this. But the thing that we always read is that the authors feel compelled to kind of flesh things out, and so they add shit. And I'm sure that the name kind of came through there. But the monster is played by a guy named Wayne Doba, who he's also all of the animatronic puppets.
He's actually only one. That was misleading. He's actually only one of the animatronic puppets.
Oh, no shit. Okay. But he was a mime and a tap dancer prior to all this. And supposedly Rick Baker was supposed to play the monster.
Really?
But that's a detail that I read.
Oh no, the guy that was supposed to play the monster was the dude who I think plays the main xenomorph. He's been in a shitload of stuff. He was in Star Wars.
Oh,
he's really tall. Yes, you're on the right track there. That guy.
I can't remember his last name now. But the thing that really gets me about the whole Rick Baker thing is it must just be a thing that was misreported in like Fangoria or something like that. But because in 81, he was.
Do you mean to tell me that Fangoria magazine in 1981 was not telling the hard truth?
They're the they're the official record of horror fandom.
I'm going to throw out an apology right now. There might be a lot of background noise on my end. That is because I live beneath a family of raccoons who cannot seem to stop making noise at any time.
They're just constantly rearranging the furniture.
My war with these fucking people. If I didn't live in this building, I'd want to burn it down.
Oh boy, they sound like a lot of fun.
I
for the record,
hate them
I can't
so
hear
much.
So here's some taglines for this movie. One of them I think is really good.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is "Something is alive in the Funhouse."
I mean,
not bad.
Arguably,
not bad.
If you have a funhouse, there's always going to be something alive in it as long as it's open.
Yep, alive. Number 2, the Funhouse is not what it seems.
Boo.
Yeah. Now here's the one. This is a really fucking good one. Pay to get in, pray to get out.
That's the one. That's the
solid
goal.
Goal.
That's the Satan's waiting of the whole bunch.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, going through it, I was looking for it. Usually, there's a lot of posters for this movie.
There's really only 2 for this one.
There's only 2. There's 2 posters for this movie, neither of which are terribly compelling.
No, they both suck, and I'll tell you why. Because part of what this movie is, and the reasons why it's, I think, not as successful as it could have been or should have been, is that Universal wants a movie that is going to cash in on Friday the 13th, the slasher craze. This is not a slasher movie, not at all. This is a monster movie at best.
It's got all of the trappings and it's got slasher movie tropes, but it is not.
No,
a slasher
and they
movie.
all
it is a monster movie at its heart.
They feel shoehorned in at the same time. So you've got your teens that really aren't obviously aren't teens. You've got a slasher who's not really a slasher. You've got all this shit just feels like it's really shoved in your face in order to make it fit the slasher mold. And in doing that, they really do a disservice because it's a great movie that they're trying to sell as something other than what it is. Like, and I think you see that in the poster too, because you've got the one with the clown, which is fucking stupid. It's the one that gets used all the time.
It's the one that they all,
I
hate it.
That one.
And so here's the thing. That poster for a very long time is why I was really late to seeing this movie, because I used to confuse this one with Clown House, the Victor Salva movie. And I won't watch a Victor Salva movie. And especially not that fucking movie.
It's not good, and it's terrible for other reasons.
Yeah. So I confused the two, even though the names are not the same, but like Funhouse.
It's aesthetically the visuals are the same. The original poster also isn't that great because it's just the mouth, and it's a little bit like, I don't really know what you're selling me here. This is just kind of lame. I do recommend Gary Pullen, fantastic Canadian artist, has done some recent art for this movie that is super cool, and everybody should be using that instead of recycling. I will say, in the physical media renaissance we're in, I think one of the best things about it is all of the new artwork that is giving work to these like sort of small artists who are really talented and updating the real bullshit art that used to come out for horror movies.
Oh yeah.
I love that. And I think just go look up that instead, because it is a way better poster, because the originals suck.
Not good. Speaking of being confused, this movie ended up on the UK Video Nasties list by accident.
Yeah, by accident.
So there's a movie called Last House on Dead End Street,
which is terrible.
Was meant to be. It's pretty bad. It's not a good movie, but it was meant to be included on that list. But because that movie was cut up and distributed in different markets under 1,000 different titles, it ended up, I believe, in the UK as The Funhouse. And that was the one that they intended to put. It's not on one of the prosecutable lists, because there's different Video Nasties lists, and the Funhouse is not on one of the ones where you could have been arrested for owning it or renting it, But that's why you couldn't get this movie in the UK for a while, because they were actually trying to get the Last House on Dead End Street.
And I'm going to tell you what.
Sorry.
Spoiler for Last House on Dead End Street. That is not a fun house.
No, it is a terrible house. Terrible house. Yep. And so, this movie was the impetus for Poltergeist. Hooper was originally Spielberg's pick for directing E.T., but before he took it on for himself. And this was back before E.T. was the friendly alien movie. It was when E.T. was still kind of a horror movie.
Look, that movie would have been terrible if it was directed by Tobe Hooper. I don't like that movie to begin with, but it would have been not good.
I've not seen E.T. in a very, very long time. I'm in no hurry to revisit that one.
It's all of Spielberg's worst instincts in one movie.
Yeah. But up to this point, Hooper and Spielberg, they've been flirting with a collaboration that could have resulted in E.T., but Hooper was more interested in Spielberg's other project that was in development at the time, which was a suburban haunted house movie. Plus, E.T. was ready to go into production while Hooper was working on this movie, so obviously he wasn't available anyways. The director of photography is a guy that I always want to mention, simply because he's attached to a lot of my favorite movies, and he's a really fucking talented director of photography. He's a guy named Andrew Laszlo, and he wound up on this movie specifically because of his work with Walter Hill on The Warriors.
Yeah.
And The Warriors is a beautiful nighttime movie.
Yep.
I don't know if this was necessarily his expertise.
No,
because he does a lot of nighttime movies.
In interviews was like, I don't really know why you want me for this movie. He was not opposed to it. He's like, I'm down to do whatever. That's fine. But he was like, I don't know why you want me for this. And he was like, I saw The Warriors, all the lights and the color shot at night looks amazing. And that is true. All the light and color, it is really incredible in that movie.
And it shines through in this one, because the vast bulk of the movie happens in a dark ride that's also quite colorful.
Yeah, and he was insanely talented.
Very, very, very talented guy. He does a lot of stuff with with Walter Hill. I think he did Streets of Fire.
He did
Also,
Streets of Fire. He did The Warriors. He did Southern Comfort. I think he did 48 Hours.
48 Hours. Yeah, like he's all over the place. You have definitely seen something with DP by Andrew Laszlo. Fucking hell of a an artist, that guy. This production, even though everybody talks about it fondly, sounded like an absolute fucking nightmare. And it makes perfect sense that after Poltergeist, Hooper ran to the embrace of Cannon films. You
could have made better choices there, buddy.
Well, they let him make whatever the fuck he wanted as long as he made Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And that was all he needed to do, because the shit that he made over there is crazy.
Yeah, I will say, though,
also,
I actually do like the movies he made for Cannon.
I enjoy them a great deal. But the production problems on this one were entirely to do with the studio. And it has a little bit in common with like My Bloody Valentine, in the sense that like that was a major studio picture also. That was Paramount. This is Universal, and those studios don't know how to make a movie on less than $1 million. And so this movie and that movie both had budgets in the range of like $3 million. But during production, like the budget kept shrinking, and so they had to like cut shit. Pages were getting just like knocked out of the original script. Like, this is not the movie that he intended to make.
No, and well, the original budget was like $400,000. Like this was supposed to be like another Eaten Alive, another Texas Chainsaw. And because of when it came out, it was just kind of a fluke of when it came out that Universal was like, we want this movie to be our next, whatever slasher thing. And all of a sudden, like, they had already done a lot of pre-production on it, and they were like, okay. And like, but a bunch of people who had already done some work kind of got screwed, because they were like, well, wait a minute, we did this for $5,000. Like, the screenwriter was like, we did this for like $5,000.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And now you have a shitload more money, but we're not getting any more money. And they were like, wah, wah, sorry. Yep. And he was like,
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. But there were other parts of this. Like, it wasn't just a studio. They shot it in Florida.
Gross.
And there was a sort of beef with the Teamsters union down there that resulted in entire reels of the movie just being lost, and I put that in quotes. So they had to do
that these lazy, surly Teamsters, that's the first one, in Florida, would hold a film hostage.
Yep. Yeah. So lazy and surly. So yeah, those guys, there's whole sections of the movie had to be reshot. And lastly, just a little bit of trivia here. The novelization was written by Dean Koontz under a pseudonym.
by noted born-again Christian author and kind of a piece of shit, Dean Koontz.
You know what? I know nothing about him. I don't
come at me, Dean Koontz.
I don't think I've ever read anything by him. And he's a prolific author.
I think there was some speculation that he might have not been writing all of them himself, but they throw shit around like that all the time. I don't know if I believe it.
It seemed like in the 90s, he was like the challenger to the Stephen King hegemony,
I think he was more like the poor man's Stephen King. He's like, do you like horror, but not, I can't believe I'm about to call Stephen King like highbrow horror, but like lower bottom shelf stuff. He's your guy.
Yeah.
Oh. I read a bunch of it when I was in high school, and I was just like, it is not good. It's like he likes like real gross shit, or he did for a while, and everything was like real sexy, but in like a way you don't want, like in like a Harvey Keitel kind of way. Like you're sure. I don't like this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. What I was going to say was this movie was delayed significantly. And so the book came out before the movie came out. And there's even TV advertisements for the book. It's on there. They're on the Blu-ray.
I love when they used to advertise books on TV.
It's pretty great.
Like when they were Dianetics.
Dianetics, man.
The power of Dianetics.
Yeah. But people for a while were under the impression that this was an adaptation of the novel. It is not.
Well, the novel was the one place where the screenwriter was able to cash in because he owned the rights to the story. Ooh. And so Universal, they were like, we're putting this out. And he was like, oh yeah? Well, you're going to give me a lot of fucking money for it. And they were like, okay. Fine.
Yeah.
And so they did. Do you want to hear some fun reviews for this one?
Oh, I would love to hear some fun reviews.
Some of them I just think are funny, but one of them I think will resonate in a way that will become relevant in a bit. So, Los Angeles Times, their review was, if written dialogue wasn't bollocksing things up, which I take issue with the use of bollocksing things up, get the fuck out of here.
Who the fuck are you?
Other scenes are so rambling they seem improvised. Poor Hooper, poor us, poor state of this sort of film. Sheila Benson, shut the fuck up.
What movie did she watch?
I don't know. She sounds like a jerk.
I know, because I'll tell you what, this movie, definitely not rambly. It's pretty snappy.
Yeah, I think it is too, because it is a tight 86 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
So here's New York Times. Funhouse is a horror movie, not a really good one, but considering that its central horror is a standard monster who pursues 4 standard teenagers, it's not a really bad one either. Tobe Hooper, the director, was in there trying. I liked that one a lot.
It's purely like a middle of the road. It's like the Futurama neutral planet guys.
Oh, it always reminds me of there's I think it might be season 1, it might even be the first episode of Family Guy where they go to, Lois is like, it's like that time we got stuck in limbo and they show them all floating and she's like, well, this isn't bad. It's not good, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
So the last one is Miami Herald. And it says, the Funhouse is a great idea as horror ideas go, and it had some good people working on it, but it turned out like a practice movie, a warm-up, something those people were making on their ways to making other better things. And I think that is actually a very accurate assessment.
I was about to say, that's not an unfair assessment of the movie.
Because as much as
it does feel that way.
Yeah, I love this movie. I think it's great. I think it's super fun. I do not think it is a good movie. Yep. Yeah. People seem to cite that quite often. I could not find the actual source of that other than a Fangoria article said that he did. And then other people were like, oh, I heard that he said it in like some rundown of guilty pleasures or whatever. And I'm like, I can't find that, so I can't verify that. I know Gene Siskel was an asshole, so I find it hard to believe that he might like this. But Gene Siskel did, and Roger Ebert did like universal horror.
Mm-hmm.
And so they might have been a little kinder to this, because as much as they're trying to, cram it your face as a slasher movie, it is not, and it does not feel like one.
Yeah, you could definitely tell, because it must have been like Hooper being a Universal Monster fan. Like he makes use of their IP. This feels like a monster movie. Mm. Oh yes, yeah, I'll give you that.
Freaks and the Psychic are both pretty evident in this, and I also think Something Wicked is a pretty huge influence on this movie. Even the kid who plays her brother is the kid who's in the Something Wicked adaptation.
Shit, no kidding. Did. Okay. Yep. Yeah. This is the second movie that he does, like the second feature film that he does that features a sort of like child in peril thing. Because Kyle Richards is in Eaten Alive, and she spends most of the movie like underneath the psycho hillbilly's house, like running from an alligator. So yeah, he's got a hang up on that.
Because I think this movie feels a lot like a YA novel. Like I was like maybe 3/4 of the way through it, and I was like, this feels like a young adult story. It's not particularly violent. It's not really a slasher. It has a vibe of like, like the kind of like YA horror novels that came out in the 80s and 90s.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And like, were it not for the nudity in this movie, it probably could have ended up with a PG rating.
And the nudity in this movie, again, was a studio thing. It was not in the original script.
It feels inserted for sure. Yeah. But so shall we get into it?
Yeah, I think that I've got a lot more comments, but they'll come along. But I think the setting of this is what makes it unique and really, really interesting.
Yeah. So a thing is, when we get to it, I wrote a whole essay, like a 3,000 word essay on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a fairy tale. And when we get around to that, I'll really dive into it because I think that there's really something to that. But in these sort of early Tobe Hooper movies, there is a clear delineation between the sort of real, sane world and this kind of off the path fairy tale world that he's kind of
Well,
constantly
there's a
throwing his.
family thing to it as well. Like
Yeah.
one of my favorite arguments or the sort of framings of Texas Chainsaw is that it's a home invasion movie, which I think is very accurate. You can't say it's not.
Yeah.
Like Leatherface gets left at home alone, and these fucking people show up and like break into the house, basically.
it's like Home Alone, but like fucked up.
But there is a very kind of insider outsider mentality in a lot of his early films, even in shit like Salem's Lot. Like he really leans into that. You see it here as well because it's a central theme here.
Yeah, because in Salem's Lot, like that's the thing. That one's kind of an exception because it's not his material, but it's almost like he finds that sort of germ in it and really leans into it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there is definitely this kind of like real world, perilous kind of fantasy fairy tale world that is in this. It's in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's definitely in Eaten Alive, which is a profoundly strange movie. Did you get around to watching that one?
No, I might watch it tonight.
Yeah. Good God. It is a fucking weird movie. Powerfully weird. So yeah. But we open with a POV shot as someone makes their way around a bedroom belonging to someone with a serious monster movie fixation, while Amy gets in the shower. He grabs a knife off the wall and a rubber mask, mimicking the opening from Halloween and the shower scene from Psycho simultaneously.
Yeah. You go ahead. I've got some things I want to talk about here.
Okay,
go
so
ahead.
this opening scene was the last thing shot for the entire movie.
And I will tell you why that is.
Now I don't know why, but I suspect that this was not a part of the original script.
You are correct.
That this was somebody watching dailies or watching a work print and thinking this movie is too slow. We need to hit the ground running, and so let's give them a little something scary. Because Tobe Hooper gives you some kind of highfalutin nonsense about what his intention of this. I think that's him sort of retroactively applying it.
That is 100% what it is. This is a scene that was shoehorned in at the end because the studio did for test audiences. They ran the movie and they all said, this movie is too slow. It takes far too long to get to the action, it's true. You don't really get into it until like halfway through the movie. And also, you promised us a slasher. Where are the boobs?
Oh, okay.
And so the studio was like, you need to go back and do something about this. And so they were like, I don't know. How about this? It's a literal nod to 2 slasher movies. And here's some boobs, I guess.
Yeah. It's Hooper going, get off my back. God damn it. I just want to go back to drinking Coca-Cola.
Or Dr. Pepper.
Or RC Cola. Depends on who you talk to.
That's right, RC Cola. Yeah. Every person references his love of cola.
Yep. There's even a set photo of him with like a bottle of some soft drink. So they weren't lying. They just don't remember which it was. But I thought that detail was pretty funny, that everybody was like, you really like soda.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. So the masked dude attacks the girl in the shower, and then they struggle a bit. And then the knife bends as soon as it stabs her. She pulls the mask off the attacker, revealing him to be her little brother, which I feel like is a troubling and recurring theme in horror movies.
The fuck?
I feel like we have seen it.
Why is this a thing? Why was this a thing in horror movies where they were like, hey, little brother is spying on their sister? No, that is not a thing that anybody ever did. And if they did, they needed some mental health help because it's creepy as fuck.
Right. It happens in this. It happened in Elves. It happens in Night of the Demons. I think they do it in Return of the Living Dead too also.
It happens, I think, in one of the Happy Birthday or whatever. It happens in, I think, the Return of the Living Dead. Maybe.
Yeah. Part two.
Yep.
For sure.
And it's like, what is this idea that like 11-year-old boys are spying on their teenage sister is gross as fuck. And I do not understand why it is in these movies so often.
So weird and so common. And it is the most alienating thing.
Because whether you were a a man or a woman writing the movie, you would have to have some real world experience in which you would go, I don't think people actually do that, right?
Unless
And
they
yet you
did.
put it in the movie, and that is fucking creepy as hell.
Yeah. But I don't know, because there's also a moment about halfway into the movie where there is a sort of anecdote about I was trying to scare my brother that feels very autobiographical. So like maybe I don't know. I'm not saying that Tobe Hooper ever did this, because this wasn't his script, right?
No, it's written
Okay.
by the guy
So
who made the terrible Captain America, wrote the Captain America script, the early 90s one.
oh shit.
I think his name's
Man.
Lawrence Block.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get this thing. I don't understand. Like, look, I get that boys are curious about sex. I mean, every child is curious about sex, but you also understand the difference and the boundaries between all these things that aren't just taboos. Like you inherently understand you don't do that because it's fucking creepy as hell.
It's just weird, and I don't like it. It keeps popping up in horror movies.
It's like the way that incest keeps showing up in horror movies. It's like, this is not as common as they want you to think it is.
Yeah. Oh, good God. Yeah. So
What I will say, though, is her reaction to this is the first point in the movie where I was like, God, she's a really good actor, because her fury is righteous in a way that it's very believable.
Yeah. Yeah, she really, like, it's that method shit. She really put herself in the headspace of a person who is being violated in a terrible, terrible way. So, yeah. She promises that she's going to get even with him for this. So remember that. So when Amy goes downstairs, she finds her parents making the most of the Universal Pictures deal, watching the Bride of Frankenstein.
Really
her
wringing
father
that one
forbids
dry.
her. Oh my God, there's like posters all over Joey's walls. There's like toys of Frankenstein. There's some fucking awesome mask that's going to play prominently in the movie. Yeah, they really made use of the IP, and thank God for it.
Is the mask, the Frankenstein mask, is that a Don Post mask?
No, well, it might be, but it's
no,
really,
because that would have been licensed.
It's really big. And I think that it was a Rick Baker custom to fit over the other mask, because it's big. It's really big. But yeah, her father forbids her from going to the carnival, implying that its appearance nearby the previous year coincided with the discovery of a couple of dead bodies. Her mother, meanwhile, gives her shit for dating a dude that works at a gas station.
Yeah, her parents are classist as fuck, and her mom's a drunk.
Yep. So then Buzz arrives. Buzz is her date. He makes a whole lot of noise out in his car, and when Amy tries to talk to him out of going to the carnival, because her father told her not to go, he turns into a real asshole about it.
Yeah, he's a real piece of shit. I don't know if we're supposed to like him or not, but you never really do, because he sucks from beginning to end.
The thing right off the bat, I think Amy is inherently likable because she's that sort of characteristic, like, blank slate final girl that everybody was like stuffing into their movies at the time. But everybody else in this movie, with the exception of Liz, maybe, sucks. So the guys suck. I fucking hate the boys in this movie.
And I don't know, I never got a sense, like, from watching any of this stuff on the disc, but like, I don't know if we're supposed to like them or not. I know you're supposed to like her because she's the viewer proxy, basically. And her friend there, Busy Phillips, she's fine, I guess. But the other two is like, are we supposed to identify with these dudes? Because they both are terrible.
Oh yeah, they suck. They're assholes. Yeah, not a decent person to be found.
And one of the things they're really doing here, and this again feels like they're trying to create a hierarchy for the purposes of killing people off, is that there's this real kind of heavy alpha beta thing implied between Richie and Buzz. That's Richie's the other friend they go and pick up, and like, because Buzz is like the cool guy showing up in his fucking Trans Am, his fucking IROC Z pulling up to pick him up, and Richie is like the nerd who's like, oh hey Buzz, hey Buzz, you want to smoke some weed? Yeah, Buzz is real cool. I think Buzz likes me. You think Buzz likes me? to the point where it's like, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure you might like Buzz quite a lot.
Yeah, he wants to be Buzz's bitch.
Yeah, he's
Buzz,
super into, but he's like, I recognize that he's the better man though. And it's such a fucking gross thing that they're really doing here. But again, this doesn't feel like Tobe Hooper to me.
no,
Though he does
because
kind of do this a little bit in Texas Chainsaw with that cast.
you know, a little, because I was about to say, like, his Texas Chainsaw Massacre cast, I actually like. I actually like them. I think that
You
they're.
like most of them. The one you don't like is Franklin.
Here's the thing. I think Franklin gets a bad rap just because of that one scene where he like acts like an asshole baby. But the rest of the
And blows
movie, he's
raspberries at them.
yeah. But the rest of the movie, he's fucking fine. Like I think that people are just rough on him because that one scene is pretty awkward. But yeah, these people, not so much. I do kind of like Liz though. But yeah, as they have this like awkward moment where they kind of fight, and this is their first date, mind
Yeah.
you.
And he says to her, "You don't want to spoil Liz and Richie's evening, do you?" And my note says, "Fuck this turd. This
I
guy
know.
sucks."
I know. No fate is kind enough for him, you know. He tells her to loosen up.
Oh,
Yep, and then he burns rubber on the way to pick up Liz and Richie.
yeah. Why don't you smile more, baby?
Yeah. So they pick them up, they smoke a little reefer on the way to the carnival while Buzz tells a joke about a duck dancing on a hot plate.
Doesn't make any sense. It's a
No.
dumb joke.
Dumb fucking joke. Richie is played by Miles Chapin, who makes appearance in the latest 99-cent rental episode about Get Crazy.
No, there's a lot of repeat people here.
Yeah. So back at home, Amy's brother Joey sneaks out of the house in order to go to the carnival.
Joey, who you will not recognize from Something Wicked This Way Comes, because no one's seen that movie.
It's been a long time since I've seen that movie.
It's not good.
I might have to watch it.
It's not good.
So yeah, at the carnival, Buzz kind of apologizes for being a jerk about Amy's dad. Like I said, keeping in mind that this is their very first date. And then they partake of the carnival rides and the attractions. Buzz attempts to explain the duck joke again, as relations with Amy kind of thaw a little bit.
And they introduce, I believe it's around here, where they introduce what I will call the first mangled hobo.
That's right. There's a couple of them.
Yeah.
But
like these people are fucked up looking.
That's the thing is, again, he did that in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where really before the carnage begins, the kids in the van have these sort of encounters with just these like fucked up rural people.
But you understand who those people are by the end of the movie. Not in this one, you don't. These are just random everyday mangled hobos.
Oh no, but I mean like when they go to the cemetery in Chainsaw, there's this drunk guy just like laughing and rolling around on the ground, and he looks like a fucking freak, you know? Like it's that sort of like we're on the way to this other, like stepping into the carnival has taken them sort of off the kind of shining path, and they're now kind of in this sort of perilous other world, but they're still
I get what he's doing. I get that he's like doing like everything here is dangerous, everything is not what it seems kind of thing, but it's like, yeah, but where do these people go when the carnival is not in town?
Apparently they stay there because they're still there in the morning. But,
I know, I love
this movie really does portray this movie really does portray the sort of simmering menace of the carnival in a way that I think horror movies have been trying to do ever since. It's all fun and games, but like
that's the Something Wicked This Way Comes. Like the whole point of the carnival is that it appears to be one thing when it is very much this other thing that is menacing and dangerous and predatory.
Okay.
And
yeah, I see definitely I see that parallel now. That's awesome. But the more time we spend there, the more kind of bizarre and otherworldly it becomes. It's like that first Mr. Bungle record, and you could see Hooper's DNA like all over Rob Zombie's movies. This movie in particular, I think, like it makes a lot of sense. Also, given that Rob Zombie's parents were actually carnies, so he probably really connected with this one in a way that most of us cannot.
What I like about this is that you can see from this, you can see where Tobe Hooper has been as a director and where he will go. Because I think he reuses a lot of shit that he did in his previous 3 movies in this to good effect. Yeah. And I think you can see a lot of what he's going to do in shit like Invaders from Mars.
Oh, even in Poltergeist,
Yep.
it's like that review you said where it seems like he's trying things out. He's definitely trying things out in this movie because you see a lot of this shit pop up. Like once he's got like a Steven Spielberg budget, he runs fucking wild with it. But there's stuff in this movie, like a lot of like flickering lights and nighttime
Mhm.
shit. It's yeah. He's
And
definitely like
I mean, you do kind of have to wonder what would this have looked like if Andrew Laszlo had not shot it.
ooh, I know.
Because I mean, the truth is that the Warriors would not look that good had he not done it. I mean, they had to tarp the city in a
Yeah.
lot of those scenes. Like he came up with some really inventive shit to make it look good. If you want to make a big, colorful carnival at night, he, I guess, is your guy. It was a smart choice, even if he didn't see it at the time. But like, you got to wonder, like, what would this look like if someone else had done it? Someone who wasn't as interested or as creative.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, he is the secret sauce to a lot of movies that I love. So yeah, a little later on, Amy and Liz are in the most vile public restroom the film has to
Jesus,
offer.
that bathroom is rough. It looks like it is made out of plywood. Well, it's because it is, but
yeah, canvas and plywood. It sets
and this
Amy.
is all shot on a studio lot.
Yes, yeah, like
This is not an on location movie at all. It is 100% shot on a lot.
Yep. Yeah, this sets Amy up as some kind of stuck-up virgin, but it also introduces this bag lady character that will reappear throughout
Again,
the movie.
mangled hobo number 2.
Yep. So on his way to the carnival, Joey.
But I think the stuck up the stuck up virgin thing that feels like another studio note where they're like, no, you got to have a final girl.
Yeah.
Make her a final girl, and it's like, oh, fuck off, God.
Yeah, because again, like a little later on, like we're gonna see she's not like that at all. Like
No.
it feels like studio notes. They're like,
There's
fine,
a bunch of shit in this that they come out of nowhere and you're like, what? That seems uncharacteristic of these people I've just spent an hour with.
Yeah. So on his way to the carnival, Joey is stopped by a guy in a truck on the road. And he demands.
Now, this is 1981. So we are not quite milk carton stranger danger yet.
Yeah.
But this guy is menacing as fuck.
I know. And then a little later on, there's going to be another character where it's like, what is this guy's motivation? Like, what is his aim here? Because this guy, he's like, what are you doing out here? Get in here and let me give you a ride. And then he
points a shotgun at him.
He pulls a fucking gun on the kid who runs away. Yeah.
It's very reminiscent. That whole moment where her brother is walking to the carnival is very reminiscent of when Ralphie Glick dies in Salem's Lot.
Yes.
When he gets like snatched, it is almost like almost the same scene.
Yeah. So now at the carnival, Amy and friends visit an animal freak show. They're all God's creatures, and they are all alive.
Alive.
Yeah. So inside, they see a cow with a severe cleft palate and another cow with 2 heads. And then a sign in the background says, danger. Don't molest the animals.
Fair. Fair request. If ever there has been one.
Don't touch Willie. Good advice.
That's number 2.
In another tent, there's a severely deformed baby suspended in formaldehyde. Elsewhere in the carnival, there's a burlesque tent advertised by a barker who looks a lot like the Animal Freak Show barker, but not exactly.
So the way that, this is Kevin Conway, who was mostly a stage actor, but he wanted to do all 3 of these barkers, carnival barkers. He was like, I got an idea. Hear me out. What if I do all 3?
To which Hooper was like, yeah, sure. And I love it.
Why not?
I love this detail.
It is so fucking good. And he is the best thing in this entire movie. But he gives her, I think almost each time from each carnival barker, the way that he looks at her is so deeply unnerving and chilling. Like the first one where he's kind of hunched over and like chewing on a fucking piece of weed or whatever hillbilly shit he's doing. Yeah. He looks at her in a way that is like, it's almost like he hates her for no reason, but it's not like I'm a man who is going to do some sort of sexual violence to you. It's more just like, I hate you just because.
Yeah.
But it is so effective. It's so cool.
It's such a neat, just like meaningless detail, but it adds a dimension to the movie that sort of kind of goes with that idea that like when you're here, you're not in the real world anymore. Like things
Right.
are
It's
just
like
strange here.
it's like a resentment or like a disdainful look that he's just kind of like, I got to put up with all of you fucking assholes, and he conveys it in one glance.
Yep. Because also, like, there is that attitude of like, oh, carnies. You know, like this is like the other side of it where he's like, God, fucking normies.
So
But
my issue when I was watching all that stuff, the supplemental stuff, was the complaints from test audiences that were like, oh, it's too slow, you need to speed this up. Is I actually love the first half of this movie. I think it's perhaps more interesting than the second half of the movie, which is just kind of a standard, monster horror siege movie.
I am with you on that. I love the buildup in this
I think
movie
the
because
characters that they get are incredible. They're basically just cameos from most of these actors.
yeah, it's fascinating. It's interesting. It's nice to look at. Like just everything about this movie, like the build up to it, and then the release, like the second half, like the actual sort of like mayhem part of it is enjoyable, but like in just an
It
entirely different
unfolds the
way.
way you expect it will.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Funhouse is also attended by a guy in a large Frankenstein mask. So just a little something to remember there. Now, the Barker really sells the Funhouse with a menacing speech about the terror of the Funhouse. Might be overselling a little bit, but he's a carny, So next, Amy and friends go to see a magician, played by William Finley from Phantom of the Paradise.
So fucking good. This scene is supposed to be longer. You can watch the extended part of it that they shot. It's not that good, but like William Finley is so great in this role.
This is one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. It's just funny, and like
I love that he's smoking the whole time.
Yeah, he's got a little flask. But yeah, he also appears in a sort of like small part in Eaten Alive as well. Also, very bizarre scene. He's pretty cool. I love this guy. But yeah, so he puts a volunteer in a coffin and then tells the story of Vlad Tepes while the audience heckles him before plunging the stake into a hole in the coffin and into the girl, presumably. And she spits up some blood, which panics everyone in the room. But then the magician opens the box, revealing the girl to be his daughter and lovely assistant.
Yeah, someone at one point yells, "Get a real job."
Yeah, he's just the best. So meanwhile, Joey has arrived at the carnival. He spends a little time taking the place in, unaware that his sister and friends are also there. And they are. They're actually behind some tents right now, smoking some of that 80s ditchweed before paying a visit to the fortune teller.
The Devil's Lettuce.
Played to maximum monster movie effect by Sylvia Miles.
Jesus.
Bring it to mind the fortune teller and the Wolfman.
I feel like Sylvia Miles had one speed, and it was like sleazy older woman.
yeah, because this is Sylvia making her second appearance on this podcast. The first being in equally as outrageous in the Sentinel.
Basically the same character.
Pretty much the same character. Yeah, she reads Amy's palm while the others crack up on the sidelines. And then eventually, she tells Amy that a tall, dark stranger will change her life before kicking the kids out for being a bunch of inconsiderate assholes.
Mm-hmm.
So Amy and Buzz make out a little bit while Joey gets on the Funhouse ride. Yep. Inside, we see that it's full of jiggling, life-size puppets, witch doctors, skeletons, giant eyeballs, etc. And then Amy and friends sneak around back of the burlesque tent, cut a hole in the canvas to have a look.
This striptease, it feels like something out of a John Waters movie.
It does, because these are burlesque women, like like in the original sense, not this kind of modern thing that everybody does. Inside, 3 women gyrate for a crowd of like hyper horny dudes who are like eyes bugging out of their heads, saying shit like hubba hubba and like awooga.
Yeah, it really is. It is like a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon.
It's a real scene,
but like from the South.
Yeah, it's very, very funny. Did you ever watch the show Carnival, that HBO show?
I did.
Yeah, this reminded me a lot of that, because there's a whole set of characters from that Carnival's burlesque tent.
Except
it's got the same kind of vibe.
They're not like sleazy or slimy on that show.
True. Well, kind of, but yeah, true. But yeah, this that I wonder how much of that show had like a little bit of this in it too, as like a sort of like a visual reference, because I enjoy that show tremendously. But yeah, so with their adventure coming to an end, Richie has an idea, and it's a stupid one.
No, it's a great idea. He's got a great idea. Hey, why
he's-
don't we all spend the night in the Funhouse? Why is that a great idea?
Yeah, so they do. They get on the ride, and then they get off mid-ride so they can spend the night inside. Some of his friends did it apparently, and so can they. So Amy calls her parents to tell them that she'll be spending the night at Liz's house. And the thing that really gets me about this scene is she calls and her mother picks up, but then she's like, "Can I talk to Dad?" So she can't tell her mother this detail.
Because her mother is drunk.
Oh shit, okay.
They don't make
Yeah.
a lot out of that. And it kind of makes me wonder, why did you put this in the script if it's not really a part of the story? But her mother is like kind of like a raging alcoholic.
Oh, no shit. Because I definitely, like, this is a revelation to me.
Because every time they show her standing, she's drinking something.
Yeah. Yeah, like a little later on when like they actually show up to the carnival, she she is like a little fucked up. So yeah, okay. I guess this is the detail that slipped my attention. So yeah, now at this point, Joey sees his sister finally. She gets on the ride with her friends. They ride it. It's goofy, looks cool as hell to me in a really crappy carnival ride sort of way.
It reminds me of what's it? The fuck I just told you the other day. Tourist Trap. Reminds me of Tourist Trap.
Yes, for sure. So yeah, Joey sees the carts they were riding emerge from the ride empty. And inside, we see the ride powering down for the night as the lights go out. The dummies all come to a stop. Joey waits for his sister, who never exits. So he decides to hide out inside the carnival until the scary bag lady scares him off. So now inside, the teens all make out inside the funhouse. They're distracted by some noises and end up watching the Frankenstein ride attendant patronizing the fortune teller's side gig as a sex worker. She haggles with him until he offers her $100 from the cash box, but he unfortunately doesn't last long under her skills. When she refuses to give him the money back, he attacks her in a rage, strangling her to death.
Okay, so this is the first time it starts to feel like a slasher where you're like, oh, this is how a lot of like slashers in the 80s really do start, with that like tricked into having sex or whatever, like that kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time where I'm like, okay, I guess this, I don't know if this is a studio note or not, but it does feel like a little bit of a cheapening to kind of make it fit.
Yeah. Like I suppose they could have found another way to just have him sort of, because this is kind of like the whole thing that kind of kicks things off, raises the stakes, or at least sets the stakes because they witnessed this murder. And so
Right.
there's a reason that they like. It ultimately doesn't really amount to much because the rest of the movie is just them trying to find their way out. But yeah,
Right.
they could have
Because
found another way to do this, I suppose.
After they see this, then Richie steals the money.
Yeah.
And that also feels like well, why did you do that? Like,
Right.
What does that serve? It doesn't, they're going to kill you because you saw him murder someone, not because you stole their money. That seems unnecessary.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely an unnecessary step, though it is kind of a setup for his death scene a little later on.
I mean, but it also feels really, it's another one of those moments that feels uncharacteristic of this character as we have come to know them.
Yes.
Like, he's a dork and kind of a loser, but like, why would he steal from a dead woman?
Right. And again, I suppose it's kind of like a screenwriting 101, like, yeah, adding, like, upping the ante or anything like that. But it's fundamentally, it's the same movie with or without it, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
So you've kind of complicated things unnecessarily here.
Yeah.
In a way that is now distracting. Like it draws my attention from everything else because I'm like, wait, why did you do that?
Yeah. So frightened at witnessing a murder, the teens decide to get out, leave the carnival, but no matter where they go, they can't seem to find their way out. Doors are locked, ways are blocked, but they do eventually find the attendant's room where, like you just said, they find the body, and Richie sneaks off to make sure that she's dead. But what he's doing is he's stealing the money. So there's some more sneaking around in the dark, and it's atmospheric as hell. Hooper somehow manages to take this seriously cheesy setting and make it really spooky. So
Yeah, I mean, it has it's a little bit like Texas Chainsaw, where it's like the innocuous all of a sudden becomes menacing because you don't know where you are.
yeah, yeah. So sometime later, the attendant brings his father, the Barker, back to his room to show him the body. And he's shocked when he realizes that he killed the fortune teller and that these other bodies that keep getting mentioned at the other sites the carnival visits are probably the attendant's work. So the Barker comes up with a plan to dump the body outside of the carnival, pin the death on the locals.
It's a good idea.
Yep.
It's what I'd do.
Solid plan. When the Barker goes to put the attendant's money back in the cash box, he finds it empty, sending him into a rage. He goads the attendant into going berserk and hitting himself. And in a rage, he pulls the Frankenstein mask off, revealing the creature beneath. He's a grown version of that like dead mutant baby in the Freak Show with like snaggle teeth and red eyes and shit. It's a pretty great Rick Baker mask.
Now, the problem, however, is that what it does is that it conflates physical disability or deformity with monstrousness.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's sort of like the end of the Sentinel. And even Rick Baker has said, I kind of wish I didn't do that. Like,
yes.
I don't think it's not that cool to do that.
Yeah.
And so it is a little bit weird to be like, so he has a deformity and that's what makes him a monster?
Right.
Is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's very of a different time. Like looking at it now, it's like, God damn it.
But everybody seems to get like, yeah, we probably could have done that better. And so in that case, all right.
Yeah, yeah. So while they're watching, Richie drops his lighter, which falls through the cracks in the floor, alerting the Barker to their presence. And then Buzz also realizes that Richie stole the money, thus sealing all of their fates.
Now, see, this is where the movie starts to feel very much like a Texas Chainsaw retread in a lot of ways, where you think this is, again, I get that feeling of studio interference where they were like, no, more like that other one you made.
Yes.
Make it more like that, where it's like, it was really interesting and compelling and visually fascinating until this point. And I do like the whole movie, and I think the back half is fine, but it's much less interesting because it feels like they're just trying to be like funnel you through something familiar to get to the end.
Yeah. So this is almost like I kept through all of the scenes with Kevin Conway and the attendant, the creature. I kept seeing the old man from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the way that he interacts with Leatherface throughout that movie.
And even, I think, even Leatherface in the second one too. Like he has that sort of like
so especially
bumbling, confused child thing.
Yeah, so he's gonna do this again, and it's almost beat for beat with the sort of relationship between Chop Top and Leatherface.
Yes.
So yeah. So again, he's trying things out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Joey is still sneaking around outside. He parts the curtains under the funhouse and is attacked by the attendant, but he easily runs away until he's caught by one of the roustabouts. Back inside, Buzz finds an axe and a dagger as the power in the funhouse comes back on. And there's also, at this point, there's also a real character moment between the Barker and the attendant. And I've read some analyses of this movie that sort of try to portray that like that monster as a kind of like sympathetic villain in the sort of same way that like Frankenstein's monster is.
Yeah. I think that's what he's going for. It just doesn't work because he raped somebody.
Right. Because I can't because not on top of that, like this whole scene is just Conway talking to him about like all the other people, all the other messes that he's had to clean up, all the other people that he had to kill. So like,
well, I think what he is conveying here though is that idea, that insider outsider thing again. It's that idea of like, it's freaks. It's we are a family and we take care of each other no matter what. Like even if we don't really like each other, like we are going to clean up this mess because that is what we do because we are outside of the law.
Yeah.
Or outside of society. And I think that's really he's trying to convey. And I think Conway does it very well.
It's a nice moment. I do like it. It's just that the sort of the net result of it doesn't make me feel better about the monster, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, from here on out, it's pretty much, it is what it is. You're gonna get exactly what you think you're gonna get, which kind of sucks because like I'm sure they had something maybe better in mind.
Yes. Yeah. So, right. Because going back to that whole thing where as the sort of they ran up against budget limitations, they started just hacking shit out of the script. So this movie comes out a sort of coherent horror movie from beginning to end, despite these sort of like brutal attacks on the script, you know?
Right. And Rick Baker had to get real creative, I think, once his shit starts going, it's like probably around the time they started making budget cuts. And so he had to make a lot of interesting choices that I think if anyone else had made them would have been terrible.
It would have looked pretty shitty. Also already like in this sort of like age of the sort of ultra high def presentation, you can unfortunately, they do things you can see that Hooper is doing and Laszlo are doing with lighting specifically to hide the kind of limitations of the mask.
Yes.
There are shots where you can see the eye holes in it, and it's not, it's no bueno.
Well, that's the problem, is that they're not actually eye holes. They are, but they're like, they have glowing lights stuck in them to look like he has glowing red eyes.
Yeah.
And so you can see that it's like, oh, this is just obviously it's a mask, but like it does kind of ruin the illusion a little bit.
Yeah. So Richie tells a story about the time he tried to scare his brother that feels like a real autobiographical story. Originally, I sort of attributed this to Hooper, but I forgot that this is not his script. But this story that he tells is just completely apropos of nothing. It sort of amounts to nothing else in the story, but it's this moment that kind of feels to me like whoever wrote that actually did this. And it's that thing where he was like, I was too scared to come out and scare my brother because I was afraid that my brother was waiting to scare me thing. And so while he's doing this, telling this story, this like noose sort of like descends and gets him right around the neck and pulls Richie up into the rafters.
So this was actually supposed to happen in one scene. And this is probably why they ended up doing that, because it was supposed to just drop down, grab him, and pull him up. But because they couldn't figure out how to do that kind of on the cheap, they had to do it in several cuts. So he probably has to tell, like that whole story is, a lot of it is probably like VO. So something is happening while you're watching something else.
Oh, okay. I get you. Yeah. But as they pull him up, the cash box money floats down from his body.
It's good.
Yeah, it's a nice touch. The action here is broken up by a real creepy scene where the roustabout who finds Joey hands him over to his parents. Joey is feverish and he's too scared to talk, and the roustabout like lovingly applies like a cold cloth to him before his parents sort of coldly take him away.
It's a very odd moment, and I don't know if, because this is coming at a time when, again, when we've talked about this a bunch of times, where like America is starting to kind of get hip to the idea that there are killers out there, like serial killers. There are dangerous, predatory men out there, for the most part, men. And this, I don't know if this is sort of a way to kind of like flip that a little bit and turn it on the audience and be like, see, you thought he was going to be a creep and he wasn't.
Right. But
it's like, well, he still kind of is.
He is still super fucking creepy. Like it's not, he doesn't do anything, and there's no implication that he did, but his manner is just
like wrong. I don't have kids, but if I did, I wouldn't want a stranger touching them like that.
Yeah. So now back inside the funhouse, one of the cars comes riding along through the darkness with someone riding it, and Buzz
love it.
Hits
good.
The best. Hits the rider in the head with the axe before it's revealed that the rider is Richie, now just riding around the funhouse with an axe sticking out of his head.
And he kind of chases after him a little bit to like, I don't know if he's trying to get the axe back or something, but
that's the part that gets me, is you don't see the axe hit. You just see him swing, and sound design is doing a lot of work here.
Yeah.
But also he like struggles to pull the axe out before he's just like, fuck it, and lets it go. And then we see this, we get this, the camera is like fixed to the cart that Richie's body is riding in. So he's just like riding away while everybody kind of disappears into the back.
And this is when she's like, she could see her parents out front talking to the guy. And it's really harrowing because like they turn and get in the car and just drive away.
Yes. So anyways, Liz chases Richie and she falls down into a trapdoor. And then that's when Amy sees her parents outside.
The trapdoor in the basement in the traveling carnival.
No, this is a sprawling portable event. But yeah, she sees her parents through the turning blades of a fan and is screaming for them, but they can't hear her through the noise. And so she is just helpless on the other side. It's a moment where I'm like, damn, I really feel for her in that moment. But also Joey is looking at the funhouse while this is all happening, but he's like catatonic. And we flash back to her being like, I'm going to get you back for this. So he's just having this like real traumatic moment.
I hate that though, because it feels a little bit like vindictive for no reason.
It is unnecessarily
the
cruel.
implication is like, oh, I'm not going to tell them you're here. And it's like, she's probably being tortured right now.
Oh, see, here's the thing. My read on that is, and I must just be wrong, because now that I'm thinking about it, like I'm definitely wrong. But my whole thing was he was too frightened from his experience to say anything.
I mean, I guess it could go either way, because it's his face is kind of blank when they do it.
Yeah, but I like thinking about it now. I think your takeaway is definitely the right one. So down below at the bottom of the trapdoor, Liz wakes to find herself in an air duct, and there's another turning fan there that causes the light to flicker. And then a little way ahead in the shadows, the attendant approaches her, and I'm hard pressed to see how this scene wasn't lifted directly from Alien.
Oh no, it is absolutely 100%. I love though, because the fan is blowing and his wispy hair is blowing in the fan.
Yeah,
it's very beautiful.
Yeah. So Liz tries to talk the attendant into letting her go, tearfully trying to seduce him so he'll come
Yeah,
close.
she says, and this is a phrase that comes up in 80s movies a lot, particularly in moments like this. She says, I could be nice to you. And I don't know why that phrase grosses me out so much.
Yeah.
Because I understand what she's attempting to do, and there's as someone who writes true crime for a living, it's just so fucking gross to be like, I know that this is they're kind of playing it up, but like it also feels super realistic in a way that I really don't like.
Because it's a survival mechanism, and you don't necessarily like. I don't watch these movies to be confronted with that. Like this is all like fantasy and kind of like ghoulish fun to me. That touches a little, because that is probably something that a victim has said right before she was killed.
Yes,
in reality,
many times. And it's like a break in of reality where I'm like, oh, I don't want that. Get that out of here.
Yeah.
And they kind of do, because meanwhile, he has giant drips of snot and drool coming out of his mouth and nose.
A drooly monster man.
Which does, again, sort of recall the xenomorph with like the shit dripping off of its face as its mouth comes right up to her face.
Yeah.
This tiny mouth.
But
I'm just going to eat you with my little mouth instead.
Tiny little mouth. So yeah, she it's not enough. She wants to draw him closer to her so she can stab him, because she's got the dagger that Richie dropped. And she does. She stabs him, but it's not enough to stop him. I think he ends up like, does he just beat her to death?
I think so. I mean, it's the way it's shot in a weird way that you can't really see. It kind of looks like he's just kind of savaging her, like, just sort of like brutalizing her body.
Yeah. So the Barker, meanwhile, corners Amy and Buzz, and he monologues a bit before he and Buzz fight. His monologue here is fucking great. It's basically like, yeah, I know that he fucked up and does bad things, but hey, we're family, bro.
It's that freaks thing where it's like, we take care of our own. Yep. You came in here, you shouldn't have.
Yep. So the two of them fight, and then he ends up impaling the Barker on the sword from a suit of armor prop.
So the interesting thing about the suit of armor, though, is because it was just a mannequin, essentially, every time he would because he backs into it, it's obviously supposed to get impaled on it. So he would back into it, they cut away, come back, and he's got a thing on the front, and he's standing right up against the other one. But every time he would back into it, he would knock it over.
Yeah.
Because it's not heavy enough to stand up on its own. My question would be, why didn't you just nail it to the floor or something? But that's not how they solve the problem.
No, they put a dude in the suit.
They put a PA in it, and you can see it moving at a certain point. That's like, well, that's a little odd looking, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but also the entire scene here is bathed in red and yellow light.
Yeah, this feels very, very Suspiria.
And I'll tell you what. So when you watch Eaten Alive, that is the first thing you're going to notice. He is at this period, like this sort of section, he is in love with like red gels.
Well, what's Suspiria? 77?
Yeah. And so Eaten Alive is 76. It's actually the year before. But yeah, that was a very popular thing, was that sort of Mario Bava, very colorful sort of thing.
Yeah.
But like this scene is positive. Eaten Alive is positively awash in red gels. This one uses it very sparingly, but in moments where it's like he wants this to be sort of like colorful and comic booky. It's awesome. I love it. It's a very, very cool, very Tobe Hooper stylistic touch. And it's also surreal as hell. So Buzz now goes to get the keys to the place off the Barker, now presumed dead. But because it's a horror movie, he springs back to life, pulls Buzz onto the sword, but Buzz shoots him dead with his own gun. But then the attendant arrives, finding his father dead. And then Amy flees, but when the scene becomes a little too quiet, she turns around and is confronted by one of the clown props strolling through the door with Buzz's dead body draped over it.
That's pretty good. It's a little Frankenstein-y again.
Yeah. So Amy then flees through the bowels of the funhouse to the attendant's room, but he smashes his way through the door.
I have a big problem with this ending because this is the only other time that I was like, this also feels like studio interference. This feels like them being like, no, you need to make her more of a final girl. You got to drag this out. And they drag it out again in that very alien kind of way where it's like, what is this section of the fun house we're in? Because this is some real industrial looking shit.
This is like Alien, where there's just like chains and shit, and everything's like there's hissing pipes and stuff.
And there's like nothing but also Chekhov's giant metal cog.
I have a fucking note here that says Chekhov's waist level gears.
It doesn't make sense.
No, it makes absolutely no sense because this is supposed to be like a thing that attaches to like a truck and travels along with it. This is a like multi-level sprawling dark ride on the scope of something you find at like Disney World. Like it's massive. But
there's also, it lacks that menace because like, again, if what they're doing is ripping off the scene from Alien, I get it visually, but for everything else, atmospherically, it's just her kind of crawling around on the floor and whimpering and like knocking into shit. He's not even in the room yet, and she's just like, "Oh my god!"
She's really a final girl in name only in this movie because really all she does is just run away.
And that's why I think that feels like a studio note where they're like, no, you got to drag it out more, make it more exciting, make her more of a final girl like Alice in Friday.
Right. She gets a crowbar and she bashes the attendant's shit in with it until he grabs it, accidentally smashes it into an electrical box, electrocuting himself. But then he's hung up on the turning chains and hooks and is dragged into Chekhov's waist level gears, shearing him in half.
It's like the steamroller scene in Austin Powers where it's like, we can all see this coming. Just get out of the way.
It takes a while to get there too. But yeah, and this all happens like amid showering sparks. He very nearly pulls Amy with him.
And he looks like a floppy robot, like just kind of flopping around. And I have another note that says the name of my new band is Floppy Robot. I must have gotten a little bored at the end.
Oh, God, I love it. So now Amy emerges into the sunlight, the lone survivor, utterly broken by this experience.
I fucking love the ending, though, when she walks out and there's like, it's not just the creepy hobos. It's like all the roustabouts just kind of like, either setting up or picking up. And like the idea that this is all going down and there are just people outside.
Yeah.
Just milling around.
Yep. And then the fat lady dummy that's been laughing and taunting everyone since the beginning of the movie laughs hysterically as Amy looks on in horror. And she's now just as banged up and wrecked as some of the other weirdos we've seen milling around the carnival. Yep. Crane shot away, fade to black, roll credits.
Damn. What a good one. I'm gonna
it's a hell of a movie, man. I do enjoy this movie a great deal.
I'm gonna ask you then, how does this one hold up?
I came around to this one very late, so it's not like one of those ones that I can be like, well, boy, I really liked it then. I really like it now. I can really only contextualize it in sort of like my modern experience, and I like it a lot. I don't think it's his best movie, obviously, but as it's like we said, it's him experimenting with stuff. It's him trying stuff out. He's going to flex a lot of this shit in very clear ways in his next movie. But just viewing it as a movie, it is a lot of fun. It's very with a couple of moments where I was like, ugh. I would describe it as fun. It's very light. It's not terribly long. It really it gets in, it gets out, and it makes the most of its time. And like I said, it suffered a tremendous amount of like production challenges and still manages to be a good movie in the end. That would have tanked any other movie, you know.
Yeah, I think I agree 100%. I think that this, where it falls down, is where other people got involved and shouldn't have.
Right.
I mean, I think obviously the disfigurement as a kind of a symbol of monstrosity, and that doesn't age well. It never will.
No.
Otherwise, I mean, it looks super 80s. It looks very much of its time. But it's big, it's colorful. The places it doesn't work is when they try to make it into something that it's not. And
I know.
if they had just left it alone, it would have been great.
To that point, like, this is a movie that he's very clearly excited to have, like, a movie that's going to sort of, at least from his point of view, be a piece of the sort of enduring legacy of Universal Monsters, because at its heart, it really is that kind of a movie. It's just that, like you said, the studio forced it to be something that it's not.
Right.
And, you know.
And I think that's why it ends up being ultimately unsuccessful in terms of longevity, is that, you know, people, they think, oh, well, here's a slasher movie I've never heard of, or a slasher movie I've never seen, and they watch it and it's not a slasher movie, and they're like, well, what the fuck was that? And I think that's really why it doesn't get as much recognition as it deserves, is because it is a really innovative thing. They're doing a lot of interesting things. They're taking a lot of like nods. There's a lot of nods to the past in film that are done without feeling like direct homages. Like it isn't just like, we know what we're doing. We know what we're doing in terms of like a lineage here. And I think because they try to make this a slasher is where it just doesn't end up being very successful. Even now, where people are like, oh, I don't think I've ever heard of it. It's like, yeah, because someone probably said it was a slasher and you either weren't interested or watched it and didn't think it was one.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes me appreciate Tobe Hooper way more than I did before. I'm like a really like I'm like a bigger fan of his now than I ever was. So
yeah,
hooray for that guy, man.
Yep. Love it.
Yep. What do we got next?
Oh, well, this here, Bring Me the Axe, will be back in 2 weeks, and we are going to be talking about one of the grossest movies ever made. It is David Cronenberg's divorce allegory, The Brood, and I fucking love that movie.
Oh God, I have not watched that one in a very, very, very long time. So
I've watched it a bunch of times in the last couple of years. I love it.
Yep. So good God. All right.
It is super disgusting.
Yep. So we'll be back in a week with 99-Cent Rental looking at Sunset Boulevard, which I'm very much looking forward to. And then we'll be back in 2 with our first look at David Cronenberg.
Yeah.
Be here.